So a few days ago, I had a conversation with a very prominent practitioner overseas about team and ancient formula structures, and his argument was that the formulas are too old, that modern diseases cannot be accounted for with these herbs and formula structures, and that Chinese medicine has evolved. But there's something that I was thinking of when he was talking about that, and that was Albert Einstein stated that the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible, which means it can be understood because the universe, everything from the smallest particle cell to the largest planets, the universe, the invisible, the visible, they're all governed by laws. They all must function in a certain way. Like, that is why mathematics is so amazing. It's not that the numbers are divine, but it actually just helps to reveal patterns and structures that govern why something works. And that is why they termed it as God's fingerprint, because everything has to work in a certain way. You cannot modify that. You cannot come up with ideas and theories that are separate from these laws that govern how things work. And it's the same with the body. The body has very specific laws, structures, patterns, because health and illness, it does not happen randomly. It doesn't just happen because you're being punished. There is always a cause. There's always a cause and effect. When the body is manifesting signs and symptoms, there's always a structure, an obstruction, something that is inhibiting a natural function, which is causing the body to present with signs and symptoms. This is a law. And when you can start to identify these laws, you see structures, and from structures, you can see patterns. And this is what the ancient medical doctors were sharing with us. This is timeless. There is no such thing as modern illnesses and disease. There is nothing in the world that these ancient formula structures cannot correct when you understand these laws of how a body presents, how a structure in the body inhibits a natural function and it causes signs and symptoms. That's why disease names, they're completely irrelevant, because if you start chasing signs and symptoms of disease names, you're no longer applying these rules. You're actually coming up with your own theories and modifying your herbs. But even if you were to modify your herbs and you wanted to modify your herbs, there's no reason why you should not do the learning course, because if you feel like you need to take something out or add something in, then share that information, because I would love to know about it, because I would love to know how a formula does not account for that sign or symptom, because you will find that it is basically impossible to modify your herbs and structures when you start to understand how the body works and you understand these rules, these patterns, these structures on why the body is presenting certain signs and symptoms. But share that information and see how it can be accounted for according to secondary indications, because identifying a primary indication is how a herb always presents. So it takes away the confusion, especially if you're in university, you're coming out of your university, or you're just in clinic. The amount of material that you've been thrown, it is so confusing, and taking that into the clinic and having confidence in what you're prescribing, it is actually impossible. I've been there. I've been in TCM for so long, went through classical, understood Campo, all of it. But they still are governed by theories and not by laws. There's a difference, because a law means that the body must have something, it must present with something, and must be accountable according to something, which means there's some type of structure, obstruction, disease toxin. Disease toxin just means there's something inhibiting a natural function. That's why it's interchangeable, that word disease toxin, with obstruction or structure, because, for example, if you get an intestinal obstruction, it can be identified. So if you want to prescribe rhubarb root da huang, you know that it has to have this thick yellow tongue coating at the back. You know that the middle guam position on the right has to be deep and slippery. You know that when you check the abdominal, it begins with responsive fullness in the upper epigastrium, which starts to develop a shape over time. So you can identify it according to things that you can see and feel. And then with questions, you know there's constipation, is there sticky soft stool, you know that there is no appetite, and then you can account for the second indications like vexation, agitation, sweating, all the things that are accountable for an intestinal obstruction. But it's a law. It's a law, which means that this is how the body will present. not just random. There's no such thing as random. Random illness, random signs, being cursed by God. This is just your understanding hasn't fully developed. It means there's things to learn, things you need to account for and put together. And this is why a structured system, an evidence-based model, is so important. But if you still feel like you need to modify, but share that information and see how it actually can be accounted for. And that is why in traditional East Asian medicine, this team model, we don't chase signs and symptoms because we know that nothing is random. Everything is governed. That a disease is not chaos. It's just an expression of an obstruction, a structure, something that's inhibiting a natural function in the body. It's just an expression of that. And when we understand that, we learn that we cannot control illness and the disease. We cannot manipulate it. Our role is to identify functions and structures. We follow laws, we follow rules. And when you follow those rules, that is why you start to understand presentations, disease presentations, regardless of how complex it is, as a story and a pattern. And it's not random. It is very structured. And that's why you have herbs that have specific relationships and dosages, because it accounts for those patterns and those structures. They always align. This is God's fingerprint in Chinese herbal medicine. And this is the foundation of true herbal medicine. We know that we cannot control something. We cannot manipulate something. Things are not random. We react and we respond. That is our role as a medical doctor, is to understand the pattern and the structure, understand the law, understand when this function is inhibited, this pattern or structure of signs or symptoms, this is how the body presents. And that is regardless of how old these ancient formula structures are, they are timeless. It does not change. There is no new illness or disease presentation I have not accounted for with a certain formula structure, like a disease presentation to a formula pattern. There's no such thing. It's just the understanding and connecting to these herbs and formula structures. They are timeless. But in the clinic, they're so practical, they're so accurate, and the confidence and efficiency you have with these herbs and formula structures, you would never see it in any other system of Chinese herbal medicine, not in TCM, not in classical, not in Campo. But if you still want to follow those rules, then bring team into that and see how it changes, and see by identifying and bringing some certainty into the herbs and formula structures you want to prescribe. See how that changes your thinking and how it improves certain herb identification and pattern formula identification, because it will change everything for you. I know that because I've been there. But it's just important not to have certain opinions about something and let an illness or a disease presentation reveal itself to you. And that is Chinese herbal medicine.